Hi guys, welcome to another video of the Painting Academy. It's been a while since I was at the studio painting, and well, I've seen that everybody or many people is requesting to see a finished project. So we're gonna evolve a miniature that is related with a volumetry video that you have seen it before. Is this Infinity Thor. It was already sketched in flat colors, and now we're gonna develop this. As you're going to see a lot of the technical application, but not a super deep explanation, because I want to focus on you learning how to work with the volumetry, how the volumes should be interpreted or could be interpreted. So basically what I'm gonna do is a panel or color block technique, where I'm going to follow the volumes that I indicated in these videos that you should check, and you will see how these volumes can be resolved in a physical way, not digital. So I hope that you will take some conclusions about this. To me, I think it's a very interesting process and more, let's say, structured or easy to follow. And I wish I will see your versions online. If you can tag us, that will help. It will be very interesting, and I think that this could be like a very nice, very interesting exercise for you to learn, and maybe in the future we can make this even more complicated. So we're gonna finish it in a simpler way, but everything can be there is not an end, there is not a way to finish something. That depends on you. So this figure is so flat but interesting in terms of volumes that you can develop this onto something like super complex, like a proper illustration, or something more simpler but interesting as well. I really suggest you to watch the previous videos, no matter what is your level. Even if you have an advanced level, I suggest you to watch these videos, because sincerely they are really well explained, and I think that you will take many conclusions. Most of the times the people with the most advanced levels, they focus only on the technical side, and sometimes they don't interpret the volumes really well. Sometimes that happens even in master categories, even in the gold awards, sometimes that happens. So I think that you should check those videos. So what we have to consider is not only about how we place the colors, lights, shadows, the volumes, but also how I trace with the brush, how I dilute with the brush. I'm gonna do a very linear process where it won't be full of mixes. It will be more linear in terms of the selection of the colors. And however, it's not a process based on recipes. I will show you anyway the few steps of colors that I will be using. So somehow I'm trying to make something also simpler to understand, as some people requested before. So what I'm gonna do first is to recover the base colors, because however they look nice, but even if you cannot see probably this on the screen, in my view, I see that all the base coats, that this is called capa base, right? This capa base, this base coat, is nothing else than just colorizing with flat color. And you have to colorize well. And most of the times I see figures, even with really high technical approaches, that the base coat is not well applied, and this is something that you should really pay attention on it. A base coat, that we will do a video about this, a specific video about this, a base coat is something that has to have full coverage. So no much dilution. You need a color that has a proper coverage, and the cover that covers the surface completely. So all those layers of paint, they will have certain viscosity, because they have to cover the primer, basically. Those will be the colors that we are gonna use from the beginning. This is like a dark red, like this is a very old sample testing pot from when I was working in Andrea Miniatures like 15 years ago, and it's something similar to a cherry red, a cherry dark red, something like this, like a wine red or like a scab red. So any color that looks like this will work. So don't be obsessed with the name of the color. You just pick a color from your range that looks like this. So I will repaint the color with this dark version, and then I will create a layering method by upgrading with colors with that other medium red, and then I will turn into this orangey, because I want to make that color, that red color, very colorful and very alive, because it has to be very cartoony, right? So basically I'm going to patch all the colors in color blocks, and I will be showing you the different colors. I'm going to use a flat brush, because in this case the layers application will be much faster and much more efficient. I use flat colors many times, and indeed I recommend you to try them, because sometimes, I mean, that save a lot of effort, work and time. With a rounded brush you will take much more time to do it, and you will leave a worse brush work. I mean, in this case, it doesn't mean that you're gonna leave the brush stroke, but with this flat brush, it's much easier to apply the color without any brush strokes. However, you know that I am in favor of brush strokes, and that I think that they look painterly and beautiful. But in this case, because it's very cartoony, we're gonna simplify this, and we're gonna do everything very clean and very sharp, right? Then I move to rounded brush. As you can see, the paint is starting to dry. I have applied the layer very thick. You know, I'm not diluting. I'm using the paint almost directly from the pot. I just introduce the brush on the water just to achieve a little bit better flow. That's all. Next step will be that Crimson Carmesy from scale 75, which is a medium red. It's a very intense and beautiful and rich pigment. You can check the analysis of these paints that we did in a streaming. I'm not sponsored by them. I'm just testing those colors, and they are really good. They are really good saturation, good coverage. The pigment is thin enough. They have certain fluidity. To me, that's the biggest problem, you know, that I feel a lack of fluidity when I trace. But in general, they are colors that could be really useful for you, especially if you want to get introduced into the heavy body colors, into the thickness, to understand how to play with the thickness, because thickness and viscosity is one of those features of the paint that you should take into account, definitely. And now you can check the colors, how they look. This is like an aleatory choice, any kind of dark red, dark crimson red, cherry red, wine red. I don't know how it's called in English, but any color like this will work. I'm not searching for anything. I'm not searching for any property. I'm not searching for fluidity. I'm not searching for viscosity. No, I'm just searching for the tone, the exact tone, or a similar tone. It's a dark, cold red, done. And it's dark, it's cold, it's purpley, slightly purpley, and that's the analysis of this color. Done it. I'm not focused on the pigment. I'm not trying to pick something over saturated. I don't recommend you to pick something like golden acrylic or something like that, because this will be no coverage and this will be too intense. So I think I need just something controllable. Next stage, it will be this, because I need some richness on the mid-tone. And the next one will be this clear orange by Vallejo. Why? Because I saw it in the table and I picked it. And I'm sorry for that, but you know, I will explain always the properties of each colors, but sometimes it's just a matter of choice. You know, it's like you pick the color, you try it, and you see how it works. In this case, I'm focusing on colors that has certain coverage, especially the mid-tone and the base tone, or the base coat, the capa base. This is what interests me right now. So in this case, I will apply the planes of light, the main planes of light in the upper planes of the folds. It will be like super simplistic. I'm not going to give priority to any of the both sides. Indeed, I just want to remark or highlight the volumes to make the viewer be able to understand how the volumes work. That's it, you know. These two main wrinkles up, they are too obvious, but this one is more difficult because you have to draw it, you know. I need a contrast between the curved fold and the new plane that I'm drawing right now. This is something that I am drawing, you know. It's something that I am deciding to exaggerate the sculpt, because the sculpt is too simplistic and sometimes you need to add your own interpretation. Painting is interpreting, you know. This is something that you have to have clear You can interpret it in many different ways, but I think that this is interesting. This is an interesting way because it continues this concave plane. This continues the movement. This show you how the movement of the cape works. And I will have to highlight both sides, the inner part of the fold and also this plane that it's flipping, you know. But obviously from this plane, from this angle, I lose the contrast, as you see, you know. So what I'm going to do is to concentrate in this trace, and this lower part I will make a blending to a darker color to make a contrast with the so from there to down I will make it darker, right? The upper part, it will be like a cylinder. It's just like one volume, as you can see, from one shoulder to the other. So both shoulders will receive light from a zenithal perspective, and then I will separate the different wrinkles, the different folds with more light or with more shadow, or we will see. But for the moment I just need to place light in the upper part of the shoulders, which is considered like a full plane, you know. And there I will extend down. I can leave this like this. I will extend it a little bit more than I want the color, because then this extension will allow me to blend easierly. You see that it has certain density to achieve more coverage. One of the things that I don't like so much about these colors is that they dry super fast. That could be beneficial for some people depending on your style and your way of painting, but to me sometimes they dry too fast, because I love to play with groups of color and have some seconds or even minutes until it dries completely. So in this case the application of the paint has to be more careful, because it dries super quickly, right? So in this case I will also highlight this edge of this shape that is like a cone, is like a like a narrowed cylinder, and it defines really well the movement. So I need to highlight this, because also separates from the front plane that will be darker, in order to make a contrast as a background with the hand of the hammer, you know. Let's remember how was the initial idea of the cape. So retain this image, because this is our goal. So I'm going to make a plane of light just below the hand, as I did, because I think it's something that will capture the attention, and is a focal point that also work as a background. As you see, I'm not being very meticulous. I'm not being very picky about how to apply the paint. I just apply the paint. Now it shines a lot, but this shine will disappear because those paints are matte, so don't worry about that. I can also think about adding a secondary plane of light in this area, that maybe later I will darken it, but for the moment I just want to highlight and to rescue the volumes, that's all. And also it helps me to give continuity to the light of that other frontal plane, and I still keep a contrast from the shadow that is just behind his leg and the light, and then I can continue it going up, and then I link with the edge of the cape that is related with the upper part of the cape that receive light as well, I mean the shoulders. To clarify the concept of what I'm going to do, they will be blocks of colors, and for making it more obvious, I will geometrize and I will create blocks that are more geometrical. It's not that you need that, but it's just to search for certain aesthetic from the very beginning, so that you can understand it better. So the color will arrive until there, and I will some part of this final area of color will be perfect to make the gradient. So the gradient will go on top of the dark red and also on top of the medium red, right? So that's why I extend the light a little bit, because this line is just a reference, right? It doesn't mean that the light will arrive till this point, but this is the most extended area I want to keep, you know. Then how you blend it, I mean, there are many different methods. It depends on what you feel up to do yourself. You know, I don't know if you prefer to stipple, make layering, wet blending, rubbing, whatever. It depends on your style. It depends on your behavior or your way of being, how nervous you are, how patient you are. It depends on many ways. You know, I'm very nervous. I'm very straight to the point. I like to work all at once. Normally, my own or my preferred working method, you know. So maybe I will do this straight away. If I was painting just for me, not for the video, I will probably make the gradient directly and then I will readjust, or I don't know. But this is up to you. Those techniques are up to you, because I have to divide this in steps. That is not natural to me to make something very linear, but maybe could be good for your learning. I just keep this in a very geometrical way, such like a comic style or something like this, like Frank Miller. Frank Miller indeed is a really, or Mike Mignola, those are really good references that you can check. And if you want to make the gradient in a very large gradient, it's better that you extend both colors that you want to match, you know. So to have a margin that you can play with on top to make that gradient, because that gradient in a very flat surface like this will be a very regular and very, how can I say, like a large transition. It doesn't have to be a short transition, because a short transition will be something for more logical for a super reflective material, which is not the case, you know. For the colors of the skin tone that I will cover again, I'm going to do this pinkish flesh that I will darken it with a brown. That could be even this burnt skin. But those are just, you know, examples. You can do this with any other color. So don't be obsessed with having these colors. You know, as soon as you see the tone, you can pick some color that looks similar to this, or even create them by yourself. In this case, I'm not creating the flesh tones because I want to be more regular, more technical, and more focused on a step by step and something more linear, as I have said. But you can do it in the way that you want. And this clear flesh will be like the last points. So I repeat, do you think that this recipe is the way to do it? No, this is just one way to do it. Indeed, if I was doing this for me, I will never pick flesh colors. Why? Because the predefined flesh colors, they have a very specific tonality. And you will tend, if you pick them as a recipe, you will tend to chain those tonalities in a linear way, and everything will look the same. So it will be more boring, you know, more too specific and too repetitive, right? So in this case, I'm simplifying the selection of the colors, also because the kind of figure I'm working on, it allows me, you know, it's somehow demanding me this treatment, because it's more like a plastic cartoon, and this kind of cartoony style deserve a more, I would say, simplistic paint job, not so painterly, and maybe a more geometric interpretation, or more render interpretation, more like if it was a 3D painted with vectorial colors, for example. So you have to adapt also the choice of the colors, the kind of process, the kind of techniques you use to the kind of figure that you are painting. In this case, I want to paint a toy, and I want to make a toy beautifully painted, right? So that's the reason why I will go for a linear process. Can you make it with your own color mixing? Well, I always recommend you to do it, because then you will achieve the exact tones that you want every time. And it's also a really good practice, give you more freedom, and it won't be linear, it won't be more painterly, and it will be more varied. But this is completely up to you, definitely. If you have a progression from 0 to 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this will be like a linear progression of colors with like a recipe. But if you make your own mixed tones, you will find intermediate tones all the time, and your progression will not be only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where 0 is maximum darkness and 5 is maximum light, instead of with the mixing technique, by mixing yourself, you will achieve a less mechanic process, and you will achieve much more progression where the steps could be like 0, 0.3, 0.7, 1, and then also instead of a linear progression, you can go out of the line and make tonal variations that will link with other colors of the color scheme, maybe. So obviously a complex palette also, it means more complex decisions where your own taste will decide which color to pick from the palette. Obviously, I understand this is more difficult than A, B, C, D, and this is up to your choice. My choice, if you want to learn, go to the hardcore stuff, learn from the mixing. But if you maybe are more lazy, maybe you don't want to mix, maybe you feel really uncomfortable mixing, maybe you just like to use recipes, then use recipes. This is your option, and this is all about art. You have to choose with freedom, and not only executing like a blind man. You have to be constantly taking decisions. This is part of an artistic process, which means artistic choices, which means taking risk all the time, right? Which micro volumes micro tonalities, micro nuances you will apply, but also what kind of dilution, what kind of technique I will use, what kind of viscosity, with which kind of brush stroke. It will be a plain flat brush stroke or a rounded one. It will be like a cross hatching. It will be like a patching, color blocking, stippling, whatever, those decisions that we will explain over the time in many videos. If you're still interested on those technical videos, please give us your opinion in the comment box. We will explain all these things, but then it's up to you to decide. Here, this is the base color I've set from scale 75. As you see, when I apply it, it's a very fleshy color, very convincing, it's very beautiful, and it's saturated, but I want to start with a darker version of this. So I could start with this color first and then apply a shadow color, but in this case I prefer to start with a darker color, and this is my first mix with both two colors. I will add a little bit of red, a hint of red, because it's too brown and I want to keep it more pinkish, more salmony, that I think it will match better with this kind of, with the skin I want to do. So that will be like the progression. Which is a pretty simple progression. That's the previous color, as you can see. And now I cover with this darker version, but still feels reddish. As soon as I have added this brown will desaturate. It's difficult to define this brown. It's a very neutral tone. What it does is desaturate a lot the previous color, and me, by adding a little bit of red, I keep the saturation higher. When I say desaturate the color, I can say that it makes this color grayish, what means it's less strong, it's less pure. So that's the reason why I insist I have added a little bit of red. So now, as you can see, this is already covered. I'm not complicating myself, I'm not doing a perfect coverage, but it must be good enough. Even if you don't trust me, I promise you that you don't need to match perfectly everything now. Now you can see some stains there, and that doesn't matter, because then they will be covered quite easily, right? So we are working from the inside to the outside. You see that the application is very thick. The colors are like they are. Then it can be more refined. This trace could be lost, then refined, rendered, blended, however you want to call it. And if you want to do that, that's up to you. You can even make those initial stages like super clean if you feel more comfortable, but it's not necessary. To me, losing the time to make this perfectly perfect, it makes no sense, because then I will stain it in future stages, right? So in this case, I'm going to sketch right now the secondary planes of light with this orange from Vallejo. It's clear orange from Vallejo, a little bit more of red from scale 75 that I will place on the palette. And another complaint about these pots is that the pots are quite small, sincerely. So to me, that I spend a lot of paint, it's a little bit of a problem. I'm gonna check if this color is enough, this mixture between the red and the orange. As you can see, it's like a very reddish and strong and vibrant orange, or a very orangey red, you know. But I have doubts to see if it will be enough bright to do a stronger transition. And however you see that it illuminates the shape is too subtle, you know. So this will allow me to be very precise and go very step by step, but I want to be more obvious and more extreme from the very beginning so that you can see the blocks better. So now I will probably upgrade this color to a brighter version because I want you to see the jump between different tiles or block. So I will add a little bit of this sunny flesh tone. Indeed, skins are colors that are very used to illuminate or to highlight red colors, because instead of bringing the color up to pink, it will turn it into salmon, so it still keep the reddish feeling. So that's a trick for the reds, you know, like using different skin tones to highlight, right? In this case, I will get a color that has a bigger value or a bigger brightness, you know, it will be brighter, but in this case, it will desaturate as well, and you have to take this into account. You have to see that then if you want to keep it reddish, maybe you will have to filter red on top. And if you don't mind, this is a color that makes a perfect progression as well, you know. So that's up to you. Again, you have to take decisions. I'm sorry for that, guys, but this is not a video game where you just press buttons and that's it, you know. This is it's an artistic process where you have to take decisions yourself, right? I'm going to this secondary selection of lights. It won't be regular like the previous one. In this case, my intention, it has to be intentional, the decision to push the light more towards a certain point. In this case, I am focusing on the vertex of the wrinkle, you know, that is going up, and I extend it down. And I am placing there because I think that this is a place that by being highlighted, it will explain the volume better, right? But it could be placed also on the top of the shoulder. That's, again, up to you. In this case, I'm just trying to get some interest on the back side of the figure. And also in the upper part, I will extend this light. So this plane will unify with the previous lights that I was sketching. And then I will make this down with a little plane and a little drawing of a wrinkle that it will finish for the moment there. So also in the other side, in the other shoulder, in this case, only a little touch there. And then maybe I will do some other touches of this light somewhere else if I want to add more information, but that's an option again. I'm doing like a radial light coming from the front view, and it's irregular. It's not symmetrical from one side and the other. That's quite important. Also on the edge, and also on this small plane. This is a concept of drawing. This is from comics. You know, you can learn from comics by seeing comics, reading comics. You know, see what these artists that are legends, what they do, and try to imitate it by interpreting why they do this in this way. You know. You see now how this separates from the front. This angle that I created, that is a fake angle that doesn't exist. This is completely flat, as you can see. This generates an intention of movement, and this is the part of interpretation. It's not only colorizing, it's not only applying colors instead of interpreting, in order to make this more readable, more understandable, and more beautiful, at least to your taste, obviously. Right? So in this case, you see that drawing is important. Do you need to know how to draw? Do you need to be a good draftsman? The answer is no, not at all. In this case, I'm taking this decision because I'm very used to it, you know. But there are many other interpretations that could be equally acceptable and equally well painted, right? In these shapes, I'm making, in this case, I'm making those shapes so angular and so geometrical to make you understand it even better. And to also fake some wrinkles or some, let's say, volumes in a flat surface that had a lack of information from the sculpting point of view. Also, secondary lights in the front, as you can see. Also, don't forget all the vertex, all the edges. Remember edges like Games Workshop, painting all the edges, but not only the edges, also the upper parts of the plane, in case that you want to do a cenital source light. Now you ask me, Alfonso, I want to make a bones light coming from the floor because he's in a lava terrain, in a lava scenario. Well, then things change, obviously. You know, this is just a very regular cenital light source interpretation, and that's it. And remember to cover well. So if you need to make 2 coats of paint, 2 layers, this is completely up to you. You can do it. If you need it, you do it. You have to see your own process and you have to identify when do you need more coverage or less. Obviously, the color seems to be not regular, not you know, certain patches that looks translucent, and it's not well applied. You have to see this by yourself, obviously. Well, I'm going to paint the metallics, and for this I will take this carbon black from Chimera, which indeed you can use any black from any company. In this case I just like the Chimera one because the viscosity, it's really nice, and it looks similar to Scale 75 new range of colors, but with a different viscosity. You know, in this case it's more fluid, but also a really good coverage and very intense as a black. And in this case I will take this gray from Reaper. Is this kind of like bluish gray color, similar to Space Wolf gray from Citadel, quite similar. I want to create a darker version of the metallic because, however, this can help me to cover. I prefer to start with a darker version of that color and then go up. All this figure will be worked in this way, you know, from inside to the outside, from the dark to the bright, to the brightness, like building up by layering. So I will recover with this gray that is mixed with a hint of black. The density is higher than the typical kind of dilution that you used to use, but I don't need to dilute the pigment because I just want to cover, right? So in this case, sometimes when we add water, it's just to give more fluidity to the brush. Remember that, you know. In this case, I'm gonna cover the plane, and this is very important. But you should also to cover the upper plane, which looks like this upper edge. But this material, this rounded plate, has a certain thickness, right? And you have to represent this thickness. So that's something that you have to check, because even in the most important contests, in the biggest categories, I see many people that paints amazingly good, but then I see that the elements are separated just by planes, but they are not considered by the frontal planes, but they are not considered as as elements with their own thickness, let's say. So that's why it's very important. So it's not only the plane that you see from the frontal view instead of the full volume, and the full volume has to have thickness. Now I'm gonna pick a color for the skin tone and to start illuminating it. The first illumination I show you in the video, that will be in the video, let's say that is more like an illustration, you know, considering more like a 2D version. But in this case, the first illumination, but just the first illumination, will be more general, will be more volumetrical. It will be more focused on highlighting, let's say, or yeah, like attracting your attention to understand what are the muscles, you know. So the separating or highlighting the volumes by a contrast of bright against dark. That's all. If you want to know how or why I interpret the volumes in this way, go to the previous video where I explained it already, how to apply the lights for a better reading or understanding of the volumetry. So it's a quite difficult video to translate. I'm very sorry if sometimes I feel like I don't find the word, but it's not easy, believe me, to translate these concepts onto another language. I'm sorry for that. Well, you can see that here with those small planes of light, but that they are very general, it starts to work quite easily. This is how you will apply colors in a wargaming painting, just to highlight the colors and make something flashy and more readable from the distance. That's it. Now in the face, I will maybe modify the tendency of the light. Instead of doing frontal, considering the plane of light that I have applied in the rest of the body, in the cape, in the arms, in the chest, then I will move the light to the frontal part of the face instead of the lateral side. And maybe on the lateral side you can add a little bit of a brighter color, but I will focus mostly all the brighter version of the skin on the front. Why? Because that's the easier way to understand the face, and at the end I'm doing something that is not logical from the physical perspective. So if light will come from one side, maybe light will not hit in that frontal part of the face, but in this case is an aesthetical decision that helps to read the model much better and to make this more beautiful, right? So now the face is just a box, you know, with a frontal plane and a lateral plane. I don't need to consider the smaller planes. I'm gonna just frame, you know, the frontal plane like if it was a box, and that's it. Simplistic, guys. Sometimes we have to keep things simple and then go more complex. If I stain some other areas, I don't care. It's not important, because I will replace this with the original color later, and it's not a problem. Well, if you want to do this more carefully and you want to spend 3 years to do this figure, that's up to you. That's your option. Well, I'm gonna sketch all the lights in the parts of the volumes that are indicated in the previous video. So please watch that video, and indeed, if you have not seen it yet, it will be very useful for you, because I think it's a really good video where I explain as best as I could how to interpret the volumes from geometrical conception to more evolved conception, that this is what we will do also in this video and in future videos, like developing this concept of more complex volumes. But every video is also it's also autoconclusive. Sorry, I was searching for the word. As you can see, I'm also painting all the planes of the other elements, considering this light direction. You can watch this on the video, I will not repeat it again, hopefully. I'm using the same gray that I showed you before, but in his initial version, just straight from the pot without mixed, and this will be my first light. Sometimes it can happen to you that sometimes when you're covering, especially with a certain brands, with a certain kind of pigments, sometimes it generates something like this, you know, like a patch of color that never covers, you know, an area that it never covers. Well, if that happens to you, don't worry. You can keep it dry and then you continue pushing colors there and you will finally cover. No worries for this. It's not a big issue. It's not a big deal. It's not a drama. I'm not a chemist, so I cannot explain you why this happened. Maybe it had some grease from the fingers. I really don't know. But if that happens, don't worry. You can push the paint like me, like stippling, pim, and then you place the stain of the color there. Just by insisting, you will get the volume right, and that's it. And then I will start adding lights in every upper plane, in every angle that is looking up, or some of the frontal planes as well, to frame at the end. We are constantly searching for definition, not blending, definition. Well, I have sketched the different planes of light, and as you see here, I'm interpreting like some kind of like sphere, like a deformed sphere. I'm talking about the helmet, right? And this will have a semicircular or something similar to a circular light, right? But it's not a perfect sphere, right? So you can, it's a shape almost like a drop or something like this. So that's why you can be more open to vary the rhythms of light, let's say. And then the wings, they will be divided in different planes as well. From the front, you see that it looks almost straight and linear because it's only one line, and the eye is not able to understand that it has some like stair shape, right? Indeed, this will be like light A on the top, light B, A, B, A, B, right? A, B, A, B, right? So that you can generate a contrast. We just need a contrast, right? It's not that it has to have a certain amount of light or obscurity or darkness or level of value, not a specific one. You just need enough to make this contrast with the other elements of the helmet. It's a matter of dividing the element in different planes in order to make it readable. So this is up to you. You can also interpret only one color, like now it's placed and painted linearly, and that's not wrong. This is just more simplistic, right? In this case, I will prefer to divide the upper planes of the wings with a brighter version of the color, and then the frontal planes of this rim, let's say, with a darker version of the color. But that has to have contrast enough also with the lateral side of the wings, right? The hammer is also simplified, right? This the darker plane that you see right now is just the base coat, and I can keep this like that. I don't need to even to paint it, because this is already doing the effect. And then I will see if I place the extremer light where, in the inclined plane or in the flat plane of the upper area, right? So I have also painted the vertex, the different edges, and you can see that you paint directly, you know. You don't need to paint this very thin, very accurate, very precisely. No, just paint it, because as soon as you see we're evolving a sketch, we are doing something, every turnaround, every new stage is more complex, but we are not focused now on precision, because precision will come at the end. First, colors, volumes being readable and understandable, and then we will define more and refine all the elements, all the edges. Now I will take this gray, but as you see, it has no fluidity, right? You see those patches that it breaks when you stretch it, right? See the difference. That's the reason why you dilute, to generate more fluidity, you know, to generate the possibility to trace more and longer. And that's also the reason why you dilute with water, or that you add a little bit of any ink to give more fluidity, because the inks, it has an oily feeling for the fluidity, and that will help a lot. In this case, this color I'm not taking in a very diluted version, but also not very viscose, you know, only to be able to trace and cover more or less, you know. And it can happen that when you trace by doing a gesture with the brush, you fail and you feel this stain that looks like a dry stain, you know. That happens very often. It's similar to the effect of a dry brush. You see that? Well, this, leave it, you know, don't erase, because it looks like a mistake, but this could end up being the texture of the stone. As you see, it's suggesting me something, and you have to be able to speak with the process itself. You know, the process is alive, and the process is showing you, hey guy, maybe you can use this failure because you applied this gray layer bad and you failed, and some stains appeared, and then you can use these stains because they look interesting and because they match really well with the element that you want to paint, which in this case could be a stone, could be metallic, but could be a stone as well, right? So if I see that mistake, then I search for this mistake, you know. Most of my painting tricks, methods, or philosophy are based on accepting the mistake as part of the process, learn from the mistake, and if it's something that is a terrible mistake, then you erase it, or you recover with paint, or you refine, or you fix the problem. But sometimes those mistakes lead me to better solutions, to better options, better choices, right? Well, now you see that the definition of the hammer is already going somewhere, and just by this texture and division of different planes, and also this edge light highlighting, you know. And now I will start adding like this non-metallic rounded effect, very simplistic, just as you see, two colors on the frontal rounded metallic plates. As you see that before in the rock, this red stain has some volume and some viscosity, and for many people this will be like a drama, like, oh my god, what has happened, I will not sleep today, I will commit suicide. If that happens, then you can maybe use this mistake as well, because it's a rock, right? And a rock has goops, has volumes, has irregular surface, so why not to use this? Don't scratch it, you know, don't scrap it, you can use it again. You see, just covering with color, that's it, with a higher viscosity than normal, so no dilution, or maybe a 20% of dilution, maybe a 30%, no more. And see how I apply the color directly, and I will apply the color not like with a dry brush technique, but almost, because you see that the fluidity, it breaks. You see that the brush has some troubles to trace, right? So then I will use this, is the painting from the pot directly. I remove the excess in a paper towel, and then I take advantage of this lack of paint and lack of fluidity and lack of dilution to start creating the feeling of a rock. Some noise that is irregular and that looks natural, organic, and that match perfectly with the material. And then you can also highlight some like small planes that the sculptor has proposed you to make this more complex, or you can even like drag the light to the front of the edge, because you know this is a 3D model, and at the end 3D models, they tend to look very rounded. So the sharper you do the painting, the more defined it will look like. And you see that I flatten the color, dragging it to the edges, right? And this is like painting the edge. That's a trick. I don't need to be ultra precise to trace all over the edge with the thinnest point of the thinnest brush of artist opus. No, I don't need that, you know. I just need to work on the upper plane and drag the brush until the end of the edge, and that will instantly define the edge by itself. And if I need more texture, I can add more levels of different grays. And then if you exceed you overwork with this, then you can layer down with the glaze. That's a world of possibilities, right? Well, it's clumsy, but now we don't care, you know. The idea is to generate contrast from the very beginning. Then later on, we will move back to this to define more. But for the moment, we just need a more evolved sketch where everything is looking at least from a certain distance. So at this stage of the process, which is still not very advanced, we just need to arrive to the point where I see the more contrast possible, which is very simplistic, you know. It's very simple. It's just apply layers of color, almost no dilution, and well, I think it's like ultra simple, you know. I think that you can follow this process without any problems. I hope. I mean, this is one of the simplest way to do it, but even though you can achieve a really interesting result, and when you will see the finished figure, some of you will be really surprised of how beautiful it can look like. Let's go with some other colors. The blue, I will pick some colors that I have around myself, and I have these ones like Dauleroni. This Prussian blue is a dark color, very rich, very intense, very vibrant. It's an ink, it has fluidity, it allows me to trace longer, and it's super strong and vibrant. And then this blue from scale 75, this primary blue, that will be also very intense, less fluidity, really good coverage, and very matte, while the ink is very satin. So if I mix them both, I will achieve a color that has properties of both sides, and that can be like the perfect tone for this, or not, maybe not the perfect, an accurate tone for this. So I want the depth of that blue and the intensity of that blue from Dauleroni ink, and then I will mix with this blue and check what interesting blue that allows me to flow over the surface, to trace without any problems, and I don't need even water. So if you don't add water, you don't lose the strength of the color, you know. And this is because of the ink, because the ink is very like oily and helps you to trace without any problems. You can even use this for doing filigrees or whatever, because it has enough fluidity again. And then if I want to play with the light, I will use the primary color directly, you know, like paste color like this. You see how strong it is and how much it flash? So that you can understand that also viscosity, the goops of color, can work and can be very useful. See how is the difference between the color in full viscosity and full thickness, or the color in a flat version. I don't know if you see the difference. Do you see that the lower one looks a little bit more grayish and the upper one is much more flashy? So most of the times I use also the goop of the color. So sometimes it's necessary to put a super bright point of view. Obviously now it's too exaggerated, you know, the volume is super exaggerated, but now I can take advantage that it's still drying to make like a perfect wet blending. But because I want to keep it obvious for the moment, and then we will blend later, I will just trace the color on top and make like a fractal. Also here, you know, following the previous video. This is like an impasto technique, you know, you place it directly, right? What I'm gonna do now is to search for another black to define the trousers from the belt and those stripes, and I want to separate it from the black of the suit. So I will make like two different kind of blacks, and you can use any mixture, you know, like maybe one could be like a chimera black mixed with whatever, with a graveyard color to give it like a very dark grayish brown, but very pale and very desaturated, very pastel. Or you can go for black from Vallejo with some kind of dark sea blue to make it more greenish. That's up to you guys, but I will show you options, you know, that you can use yourself. So we can maybe develop in another video a video just about how to treat blacks. If you're interested on this, obviously please put your opinion in the comment box. We need more feedback. Obviously if you support those technical videos, but obviously if we do a technical video, then it means that this video substitutes a process video. So that's up to you. Just tell us what do you think. I think that those would be very interesting and important videos that can be very helpful for you, but that's completely up to you. So I have created a proper black, and we will see what's next in the second part. So thank you for following. Thank you very much. See you in the next video. Bye bye.